But that kind of odd, backwards politics episode, 15 years ago, 2006, the Republican Party unsuccessfully trying to head off a shellacking at the polls, trying to repair their image with black voters, making a big show out of moving early to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They ran into problems with their own members in Congress who didn't actually support the Voting Rights Act. And we saw this very unusual thing at the time. The biggest corporations in the country stepped up. Walmart first among them, but AT&T and all these pharmaceutical companies and Coca-Cola and the Walt Disney Company, all the biggest corporations in the country stepped up, stepped into the ring and helped them get that vote right and helped them get the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act done. And for voting rights, it was a short-lived victory. They did reauthorize the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And they got their big photo op out of it, and they tried to help themselves with it in 2006, sort of to no avail. But for voting rights themselves, it would only be a few years later, in 2013, when a conservative Supreme Court majority led by justices appointed by George W. Bush would actually just rip the guts out of the Voting Rights Act and eliminate basically all of its most important protections. So even though it was reauthorized by Congress in 2006, it was eviscerated by conservatives in the Supreme Court in 2013. And now this year, in 2021, Republicans in state legislatures all over the country are racing to enact the largest, most wide-ranging, most aggressive restrictions on voting rights since the 1960s, since the Voting Rights Act back then blocked the worst of it. Right now, there's no Voting Rights Act to speak of to protect voters in all these states, but Republicans are now moving to strip their voting rights as fast and as far as they can. And so now, once again, 15 years down the line, some of the biggest corporations in the country, once again, some of the same ones that spoke out 15 years ago, are speaking up on this issue now. And most of them were very tentative about it at first. Now we're starting to see more momentum. But big corporations are saying that while they usually only weigh in on things that affect specifically their industries, on this, on voting rights, just like they said in 2006, they are once again saying it is such a fundamental thing about how our country functions and what we stand for that they want to be recognized as standing against voting rights rollbacks. They want to stand against the voting rights restrictions that Republicans are putting in place in the states. And increasingly large corporations in increasingly large numbers are willing to stick their necks out at least a little bit to say so. It's not the first time it happened. It happened in 2006 in different circumstances. And, you know, it's not a monolithic response. Companies like, they're doing this at different degrees. Patagonia, for example, today, the company Patagonia that makes outdoor gear. Today, they went beyond criticizing the voting restrictions put in place by Georgia Republicans. Patagonia said today they're now going to fund pro-voting rights advocacy groups in Georgia, including the New Georgia Project and the Black Voters Matter Fund. Over in Texas, meanwhile, corporations like AT&T that stood in favor of the Voting Rights Act extension in 2006. This year, AT&T has made sort of mild pro-voting rights statements, but they haven't taken a strong stand against what Republicans are trying to do against voting rights in the states right now. AT&T right now and others, they're facing pressure to take a more pointed stance, to put their money and their institutional heft where their mouth is on this. Activists are saying they ought not get credit, essentially, for saying mild things in favor of voting rights. They should actually weigh in and try to stop voting rights restrictions. In Dallas, AT&T Plaza this week is going to see a rally and a big press conference on Thursday to press AT&T to do more, along with other Texas companies like Frito-Lay and Pepsi and Valero and Whole Foods, and the list goes on. Companies taking a stand, big business in our country taking a stand in favor of voting rights, is not actually a new thing here. Republicans had to deal with this in 2006 as well, when the politics of the circumstances were a little different. A president of their own party wanted the Republican Party to at least appear to get over onto the voting rights side of things. At that time in 2006, corporate pressure actually helped Republicans get in line to do that. This year, they're not even bothering to pay lip service to the idea that Republicans support voting rights. This year, Republicans are only uniformly and aggressively pushing against voting rights. And so this year, they are really not handling it well, that big business interests, once again, are on the voting rights side of things.
My warning, if you will, to corporate America is to stay out of politics. It's not what you're designed for. You get my drift. This is an issue that the big corporations in America, Major League Baseball being one of the biggest, should stay out of. If I were running a major corporation, I'd stay out of politics.
Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell pounding his little shell and telling corporate America to stay out of politics. Warning them. My warning is to stay out of politics, at least on this. At least stay out of being in favor of voting rights. There is literally no one in American politics who has done more as an individual to ensure that companies stay in politics, to ensure massive unrestricted corporate involvement in U.S. politics. There's literally nobody who has done more for that cause than Mitch McConnell. It's the one thing he's been devoted to more than anything else in his own career, his own power and making sure that corporations can flood as much money into politics as they want with absolutely no accountability for it. The last bipartisan campaign finance reform law that we had as a country, remember that? McCain-Feingold, remember that? When that went to the Supreme Court, challenged by the corporate interests that it restricted, what was that court case called before the Supreme Court? It was called McConnell versus Federal Election Commission, as in Mitch McConnell suing to make sure corporations can stay in politics as much as they want. That is what he has built his career on. But now that corporations are saying they're in favor of voting rights, now today,
My warning, if you will, to corporate America is to stay out of politics.
Yeah, stay out of politics if you're going to be on the side of voting rights. We were willing to have you help us with that in 2006, but right now we're on the other side and you better shut up. We're warning you. It does actually matter when corporations with a lot of money and power come out and support something like voting rights. It mattered when they shocked everyone, including John Lewis, when they did it in 2006. It matters now. Republicans are infuriated by corporations taking a stand about Republicans just did to voting rights in Georgia. Texas appears to be the next big battleground. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.